Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Nityena Namaho Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gaurvani Vicharini Nirvishesha Chari Satari Namaste Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Aditya Gadada Shri Vasadi Gauravanta Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Gadada Shiva Sati Gauravata Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Rama Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Gauranga, let's do this. Hare Rama Do you remember in the middle there?
Yeah, of course.
Fill the page.
Yeah, I was just thinking.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Harinam Sankirtan ki jai. Transcendental Book Marathon ki jai. Brihat Madanga ki jai. Sri Sri Radha Parasishwara ki jai. Sri Sri Jagannath Baladev Subhadra ki jai. Sri Sri Nitai Sachi Sutta ki jai. Shri, where have we got there? Shri Shri Mayapur Kodinatai Mayapur Shashi ki jai. That's Scotland. Amazing deities in Scotland. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Kanaya ki jai. That's our Shri Shri Nitai Gauranga Rai. That's our deity. Penang in Malaysia. Shri Shri Radha Gopinath ki jai. That's in Sydney. And who else? Huh? I don't know if there's anyone from New Govardhan there. Shri Shri Jagannath, lots of Jagannath devotees are there, and lots of devotees. Shri Shri Radha Madhava there from Manila, and several devotees from Manila are there, and Shri Shri Nitai, Nanda Nitai Gaur Chandra there from Christchurch, Shri Shri Radha Giridhari from Auckland, and who else? I don't know. I don't know the name of the deities in Suva. I've forgotten the name of the deity in Suva. But wherever you are, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna. So welcome everyone this morning to a little Sangha. My good fortune, pleasure to be here. I'm in Paris at the moment. You can possibly guess why. Because we're on the, I don't know, fourth or fifth, I've lost track. Today is the fifth day of the Srila Prabhupada, at least in France, book marathon. You may have already started earlier than we did. We're on the fifth day here in Paris, or in France, we should say. And some of the devotees online are taking part in this marathon, and we like to thank you all around the world for bringing pleasure to Srila Prabhupada. Many ways to bring pleasure to the pure devotee of the Lord. And one of the most emphasized, most needed ways of bringing pleasure to our parampara through Srila Prabhupada is the distribution of this transcendental knowledge. And we have this impetus at this time of the year in December. It's been going on since 73 or something. This marathon has been going on in ISKCON. It was just a few days in the beginning. Now it's a whole month. Do what you can. Please do what you can to show our indebtedness to Srila Prabhupada. We can never repay the debt to the spiritual master Prabhupada, but at least we can do what we can to try to bring pleasure to him. Prabhupada would smile. Many quotes are there, of course, throughout the writings and teachings of Srila Prabhupada about how effective, how significant, not just, we may not see You may not see the fruits of the tree immediately. When you plant a seed, it takes time. And good seeds, or good, let's say, good fruits, generally take quite a long time before they sprout. They don't sprout immediately. So the plant doesn't sprout immediately. What to speak of the fruit manifesting? That's possible. Lord Chaitanya immediately put a seed in the ground, or mango seed, and immediately a tree laden with all luscious, juicy mango fruits appeared. But generally it takes, where the control of Krishna in the form of time, it takes time. But where business planting the seeds, those seeds will sprout in due course of time. Even no matter how hard-hearted a person is, eventually that little seed of devotion which devotees plant, those books go everywhere, all over the world, to far distant places. So today, so far in France, we can always do more, but the devotees have been doing extraordinarily, sincerely, sacrificing their lives to be instruments to pass on these books. Young devotees here in France, old devotees. We have some very senior devotees going out on Sankirtan now in France. They used to go out in the 70s and 80s on book distribution. Some of them are again distributing books. In fact, top, bottom, it doesn't matter, but whenever, numerically speaking, top book distributors in the marathon, only been out one day so far, but they've done the highest score in the marathon so far in one day. And the next highest is by another senior devotee who in the 60s and 70s, who are going out again on book distribution. So to me, this is another area of inspiration, another area of encouragement, is when devotees of senior age also participate in this book distribution marathon according to their capacity. We may not have the capacity, but according to our capacity to take part in this Prabhupada book marathon. It brings us close to the lotus feet of Srila Prabhupada. It's like rolling in Prabhupada, the dust of Srila Prabhupada's lotus feet. Yes, sometimes Prabhupada gives a little kick when we need it. Right? The Prabhupada said, don't worry, all your so-called problems, with one kick of my foot, they will all go away. So this is the way we get a little, you could say, the kick of a pure devoted lotus foot is the greatest benediction. Should not think, oh, why am I this is happening to me, and so on and so forth. Why am I difficult? Okay, sometimes we may not be able to tolerate or understand or go through all the various challenges in our little efforts to progress in spiritual life. But the bottom line of it is Krishna is taking, basically guiding control of our lives. Whatever we go through is not by chance. It's not some, it's not, let's say, a result of, if having a struggle on Sankirtan, for instance, it's not a result of Sankirtan per se. It is a result of Sankirtan in the absolute sense. It's Krishna's special mercy. As we mentioned a few weeks ago, Sankirtan, the whole spiritual world, actually everything is meant to be Sankirtan. Sankirtan means complete glorification of Krishna. So Krishna is acting in such a way to remove whatever clouds are there in our consciousness, which are not, let's say, manifesting pure devotion, or causing apparent blockage to the manifestation of pure devotional service. So we try to see Krishna's hand working in all kinds of situations. So I thought today we'll read a little bit from Prabhupada Lilamrita. As I said earlier on, we're kind of in a marathon mood right now. We don't have much time for, other services at the moment, other than facilitating the Sankirtan. Om Jnana Timarandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshuram Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupakadamayam Dadati Shvapadantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Yuttapada Kamalam Sri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Sri Rupam Sakajatam Sahagana Raganatan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Harijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bando Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sutadevi Pranamami Hari Priye Panchakapatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswate Devi Gauravani Pracharine Devasesha Sunyavadi Astachare Shatarine Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasati Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Panchakalpatarubhyascha Kripasinivevacham Pavanevi Vaishnavi Namo Namaha Hare Krishna. So I'm reading from the Lila Amrita, Prabhupada Lila Amrita. This is from the chapter number 43 of the Prabhupada Lila Amrita. And we're going back to July the 5th, 1970. And many of you probably were not born at that point in this body, which we're in now. That's over 50 years ago, 51 or more years. Srila Prabhupada was attending the 1970 Rath Yatra in San Francisco. The day was cold and windy. And about 10,000 people had joined in Lord Jagannath's procession through Golden Gate Park. Incredible numbers used to come to the Rath Yatras in San Francisco, and they're all 99% American, white Americans, mostly young searchers, seekers, hippies, whatever. Srila Prabhupada had danced in the street with thousands of participants during the parade, addressed a large crowd in an auditorium by the beach, and looked on as his disciples had distributed a free vegetarian prasadam feast to thousands. That's this great Rath Yatra festival. One time, Srila Prabhupada wrote, by the introduction of Rath Yatra festivals all over the world and by mass book distribution, we will conquer the world. These two programs are so important in our spreading of this message of Krishna consciousness. But when a devotee arrived with half a dozen advanced copies of Volume 1 of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Srila Prabhupada appeared especially pleased. Sometimes we hear it was more than half a dozen. Sometimes we hear it was a whole box, which maybe more, I don't know, but several copies at least. Surrounded by devotees and curious festival goers, Srila Prabhupada held one of the books, admiring the front cover with its full picture of Radha and Krishna. These were very big books. I don't know how big, but they were very big, and they weighed a lot. They weighed maybe 1 or 2 kilos, maybe 2 kilos each. The biggest, I think the biggest publication of Prabhupada's books that we ever had in ISKCON, 2 volumes, really big writing. You may have seen them. The volume was big, almost, there we go, 7.5 by like 10.5 inches, and its dust jacket shone silver with large bright red letters, Krishna. And this was the first book I ever received, was the Krishna book. I purchased one copy in 1971 in what we call an occult bookshop in London off of Tottenham Court Road, some little narrow street there where there were several occult bookshops. I went there and I found this Krishna book, volume 2, sitting in there with this shining silver dust jacket and a beautiful picture of Krishna on the front of this book. And I purchased that. It was the first book I ever got, book on Krishna consciousness movement. Not on Krishna consciousness exactly, but on from Prabhupada at least. It was a transcendental wonder in Srila Prabhupada's reverent hands. Prabhupada was so pleased to receive this Krishna book. He wanted that every home should have a Krishna book set, Krishna set. He considered it so important. He should flood the world with Krishna books, because Krishna books, they're all Krishna books. One time Prabhupada said, one devotee said, Prabhupada, these, praising the Prabhupada said, these Krishna books, this Krishna book is so wonderful. Do you know why it's so wonderful? It's a famous quote. And the devotee said, because you wrote it, Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada said, no, it's wonderful, because I didn't write it. Krishna wrote it. That's what makes it wonderful. And the more we're tuned into this, let's say, seeing ourselves as Krishna's, for Krishna's pleasure, playing instruments sometimes makes it almost impersonal, but it's not. In reality, we are part and parcel of Krishna, and our constitutional position is to bring pleasure to Krishna. The book distribution is a united program which everyone can take part in some form or another. It may not always be going on the street. We just had a nice letter from one of our Sankirtan devotees who was 4 or 5 days, practically done the most Bhagavad Gitas for sure. And someone was saying, well done, what? No, it's not. Please don't say that. This is a collective effort. Many devotees cooking for the devotees, many of our local grihastas here in Paris are cooking lunch and breakfast for the Sankirtan devotees. Others are bringing books to them and organizing various aspects or accommodating them in our homes in Paris City, and so many various services related to the yajna, the sacrifice. Every yajna has many constituents. It's not just a fire burning. There are so many aspects, different arrangements to clean the area, if you're doing a fire yajna, bringing in the ingredients and everything, and arranging everything. So many aspects to yajna. It's not just a priest sitting there pouring ghee into a fire. So that every yajna has so many different aspects to participate in. It's like deity worship. There's so many aspects. Worship of the deity doesn't just mean going on the altar. It means bringing a gift for the deity. It means bowing down in front of the deity. It means being clean in front of the deity. It means glorifying the deity. It means collecting funds for the deity, making arrangements for temples for the deity. Unending, it goes on and on and on, different ways that we can, perform the yajna, the Sankirtan yajna. So like that, you can assist devotees, or you can do online. Now we have social media as a big channel for distribution. I probably mentioned it a few weeks ago. One of our devotees met a celebrity here in Paris on the Sankirtan. And this celebrity interviewed him for about 2 minutes about what he's doing, and he just spoke about Bhagavad Gita. And within, I think, the last 2 weeks, he's distributed online about 200 Bhagavad Gitas from that interview, because that man there were 750,000 hits on his site from that one video, maybe more. That was a week ago. There was 750,000, maybe more now. And hundreds of those people purchased Bhagavad Gita, not just through him, but through Amazon and various other channels. More, we don't even know how many. We do know that at least 200 Gitas were sold directly through his Facebook. So there's another way of distributing Prabhupada's books. And Prabhupada said we should rack our brains. The best way to engage our brains and to control our restless minds is to think, to try to focus, or Prabhupada said, rack your brain to think of novel ways to spread this Krishna consciousness movement. But bear in mind, it should be done in a respectful way, not thinking I'm the doer, I'm proud, I know better than everyone else. Whatever Krishna has given us, we try to utilize that in his service to our best capacity for spreading Krishna consciousness in various ways. So I'll read on. Let's see, one of those big. Onlookers could barely restrain themselves from pressing in against Srila Prabhupada to peer over his shoulders. The crowd was huge, but I mean, many of the people nearby were eagerly looking to see what Prabhupada had in his hands. And they didn't restrain their exclamations when Prabhupada smiled and opened the volume. He examined the illustrations, the print, the paper, and the binding. Very nice, he said. It was printed in Japan, first class printing. The pictures were very simple. In fact, I can see one of them. You may not see it, I don't know. I can see one of the pictures on the screen from the Philippines. It's a picture of Lord Brahma offering his prayers to little Krishna after the Brahma Vimohana Lila, prayers of Lord Brahma. And it's very interesting because that's that's where Prabhupada left off his translation on the Srimad Bhagavatam, on the previous chapter of that. So that was one of the paintings from that first volume of the Sri Krishna book. Very nice, Prabhupada said. He liked everything. He fixed his attention on the page, reading. Then he looked up and announced that this greatly valuable book, Krishna, had just arrived and that everyone should read it. Holding one book in his hand with the other copies stacked before him, he said that anyone who so desired should come forward and buy a copy. So here we see Prabhupada was the first distributor. Actually, Brahmananda was the first distributor. He sold one on the plane as he came over from Tokyo to San Francisco. But basically, Prabhupada was the first distributor in public of this Krishna book. People began clamoring and hands with $10 bills burst forward while voices cried out begging for a copy. You don't get this too often on Sangatam, that crowds of people gather around you with money in their hands, begging, please give me a book. It would be interesting. Maybe in a few places. I remember in Africa, when a little while, I don't know if anyone from Africa is online here, probably not. But I remember when I was in Africa, in Kenya, and we were doing traveling Sankirtan in Kenya, trying to distribute Prabhupada's book there. We had that experience. In India, you also get this experience, and maybe a few other places, but not very often. But in Africa, it was like that. If you had anything like a book or a magazine, people would crowd around trying to get a copy like anything. And with $10, we just asked penny mojo, which is 10 cents. And I don't know what the currency there is Kenya now, but it was shillings and cents in those days, pence, cents, or whatever. And we just asked the equivalent of like 1 penny mojo. And people would give a penny and get a magazine. And like this, like hundreds of people would crowd around. You could never have enough. It's kind of interesting way. And we went one time, remember, we went up into the mountains. We didn't know it was exactly what was going on until we got there. It was supposed to be the regional capital of this mountain state, So we drove up the mountains in our van, about 6 of us, with the idea of going there. And we didn't realize, on the maps were rather crude. It looked like it was about, 50 to 100 kilometers, maybe a couple of hours drive or something. But it was one of those mountain roads that goes round and round, like this. On the map, it looked like it was that straight line. And it took us about 7 hours to get there. And by the time we arrived, it was about 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. We didn't know what to do. And this was the capital. There was one building. I mean, when I say building, I mean like a solid structure in the whole place. That was it. A kind of dusty square with a lot of huts around them. Not many, maybe 20, 30 huts around it. Small, tiny village. It was just the happened to be the mountain administrative center, which was in a brick building. And anyway, we got out and we started with hardly anyone around. We started chanting Hare Krishna. Within minutes, thousands of people gathered from somewhere, God only knows. We were surrounded by every type of, tribal, mostly tribal people dressed in their tribal outfits, and then women dancing with their swords and spears and shields and everything, dancing around. The old ladies with their straw mats, bouncing up and down, straw dress, and bouncing around, things in their noses and hangings and necks up, and all sorts of different things. It was quite a scene. I wish we had some pictures. It all happened so quickly. This was back in 1979. And nobody had ever been there before. I don't even know if anyone's ever been there since. Like a really remote place. And we're having kirtan, and then we get out the magazines, and within 5 minutes, like 500 magazines have disappeared, gone, and people going wild. And then we prasad distribution. We bought up some big containers of prasadam, and again, no time at all, it was all gone. One devotee had spoken a few words in Swahili. Krishna Balaram, his name was, Swahili boy, and people were just going wild. They'd never seen anything like this before. They loved it. And then as we thought, well, we can't stay here overnight. So about 6 o'clock, it was getting dark, but we had to drive anyway. Somehow we had to get out of there, dangerous as it was. But we couldn't stay there. So we started driving, and one little black boy came up to us and was saying something in Swahili, and KB told us what he was saying. He said his father wants us to come to his house. He wants to meet us. And we didn't know what to say, because that can mean many things. And it appeared, apparently, well, not apparently, it was a fact that his father was the man who lived in the brick house. He was like the village chief, the regional administrator head, big man. So that often means when you go to these places, that, of course, it's changing, but traditionally it means they want to invite you to their house to eat a nice big pig, a nice hot pig. And then after that, they offer you one of their daughters, or maybe each and every one of you gets one of his daughters. He had about 10 wives with hundreds of kids all over the place. And, quite a risky situation. So Krishna Bam spoke to the kid, and they got, anyway, whatever, he felt convinced that wasn't the case, that we wouldn't have to be subjected to such an ordeal. Otherwise, we might end up on the dinner table ourselves. So we took the risk and we went to his house. And even if we hadn't gone, we would have probably been in more trouble than if we did. So it wasn't much choice, really. So we went there, and sure enough, there was this very large sized African gentleman sitting behind a long table in his house. It was obviously the meeting room for the district. And we came in, 6 of us, and they were speaking a little in Swahili with KB and this man. And then suddenly the man pulled out Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita as it is from under the table and put it on the desk. Now, it's an English copy, of course, it's not Swahili of those days. So he picked it up and he said, "Is this your book?" He spoke English. He said, "Is this your book?" And again, it was risky. You say yes. Maybe he didn't like it. Maybe he's a Muslim. Maybe who knows what he is. Anyway, we had to say yes. We couldn't deny it. And he said, and then he pulled out another copy. He had 2 copies of this Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita. And he said, I want you to stay here and teach me this book. He said, this book is the book of God. Please teach me. Some or another, Krishna had inspired him. Nowhere, in the middle of nowhere, no one had ever been there before. This man had Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita. And he got it at a tribal chief's meeting in some town called Nakura a year before or something. Someone had given it to 2 of them to him. Somebody got through somehow. And there was Prabhupada already there in this remote place. These books go far and wide. We may not, but they go all over the world. They penetrate places we would never even heard of. Believe me, there are Prabhupada's books everywhere in the world, even in Antarctica. Prabhupada's books are there, everywhere. And they were there, as Prabhupada said, they're like time bombs. It's a matter of time before they actually, maybe before they, even now they're still finding, what they call it, mines and bombs and hand grenades and things like that from the Second World War, active sometimes. They're just buried, you can't see them. And of course, the time they manifest, they're found. But these books are incredible. And there's a fact that many times the person who takes the book is not the one who actually enters into the book. That person is also an instrument to take it to the place where it's meant to go. And the person is meant to receive it. I'm sure many of you have tremendous experience of that, stories of this mystical way that the message of Krishna reaches the different destinations around the world. So I'll read on a little bit here. And Prabhupada promptly sold every book, not even keeping one for himself. One time when Prabhupada was in New York, and even earlier than this Krishna book came out, the teachings of Lord Chaitanya. It was a yellow book in those days. It was another early book which we came across. Teachings of Lord Chaitanya was probably 69. And Prabhupada was reading, the one copy arrived from the printer. Prabhupada received one copy. He looked at it, and it so happened that the young man who Prabhupada stayed with, they call his name Paul, Paul David. His name was David Murray, who Prabhupada stayed with in the Bari, had been out away from Krishna consciousness. The boy that sometimes we hear basically drove Prabhupada out. It was kind of, it may not have been quite like that, but anyway, whatever it was, the boy, was a bit crazy, had turned up that day. Somehow or another, he came on that day by Krishna's grace. He came that day. And Prabhupada greeted him as if he was an old friend. And the devotees were, for those who knew, some of the devotees knew him, and they were skeptical about his coming. And Prabhupada greeted him like an old friend and gave that copy to him as a gift for the service which he rendered. So like that, Prabhupada was, I think this is my book, this is Krishna's book. And this is meant for everyone. Everyone should receive some way or another this message of Krishna consciousness. Even if they don't understand it, Prabhupada himself wrote, even if they read one page, one verse or shloka, one line, even one word, their life will be perfect. Even if they just see the book or touch the book, it's a form of Krishna. These books are deities. They're not just books about something. They're actually forms of Krishna, non-different. We may not be consciously aware of that throughout our lives sometimes, but ultimately these books are worshipable. Prabhupada said we didn't need, when we were doing traveling Sankirtan in the early 70s, Prabhupada said you don't need deities, you already have deities. The books are deities. They are deities, forms of Krishna to be worshipped. And how we worship them? We read them. We study these books. We keep the books respectively. We study them. We distribute these books to others. This is, when we're in Africa, also very interesting. I didn't hear from Prabhupada, but Brahmananda Prabhu told us that Prabhupada had told them there in Africa that they should make deities of Gaur-Nitai and distribute them just like we distribute books practically. The deities of Gaur-Nitai were made of wood, and they looked like voodoo kind of figurines. Pointed, very pointed, with the fingers kind of going up like this, pointed. They made thousands of them, and tried to just get everyone to say these are good luck charms. Good luck charms. You just put a flower in front of them and give you good luck. Say Hare Krishna, put a flower in front. And Prabhupada was thinking somehow or another to engage these people. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Lord Nityananda are so merciful. They haven't come just for some elite club of, whatever, so-called, devotees or something. They've come to drown everyone in the Sankirtan movement. That's not considering who is fit, who is unfit. Lord Chaitanya is distributing this Krishna consciousness to everyone, not considering who wants it and who doesn't want it. You take it. And somehow or another, devotees' happiness is when they see others connecting with Krishna by the mercy of the Lord. This brings great happiness to the devotees. So we can be a part of that, bringing happiness to the Lord by connecting his parts and parcels to him through the performance of this Sankirtan Yajna. It's the most wonderful opportunity. For the devotees, Srila Prabhupada's selling of the Krishna book was the most spectacular event of the Rath Yatra festival. Can you imagine? It's something that sticks in your mind eternally when you see Srila Prabhupada personally distributing these books in front of 10,000 people, or whatever it is. It's such an inspiration when you see that. Yeah. You just want to do the same thing to please Prabhupada. But somehow or another distribute these books. They poured over the purchased books in groups, discussing Krishna's pastimes and the effect they would have on the people of America. I guess the first 6 copies or whatever it was were mostly grabbed by, already practicing devotees, I guess. For the devotees, Srila Prabhupada's selling of the Krishna book was the most spectacular event of the festival. Brahmananda told how in 1967, Prabhupada had given away, I won't mention that again, it's mentioned here. Brahmananda had been astounded to see Srila Prabhupada give away his only copy of the book. Having helped publish the book, Brahmananda knew how painstakingly Prabhupada had written it and how he had anxiously waited 1 year for the book to finally see print. Yet once it had arrived, he had immediately given it away to a disciple who was not even in good standing. It says here Satyavata. I'd heard a different story, but here it says Satyavata was one of Prabhupada's early disciples, first disciple, who went away from Krishna consciousness, and there were different stories in there. Satyavata had taken the book, thanked Srila Prabhupada, and left, never to be seen again. Never to be seen again. But Prabhupada never forgot. I'll just tell you a little thing. Agni Dev Prabhu was staying here with us in France. We were talking the other day about, I could say parenthood in a sense, and also disciple relationship. He was telling how his son had kind of drifted a little bit, but his love for him never went away. And he quoted Prabhupada. One time Shruti Kirti Prabhu told him that Shruti Kirti was massaging Prabhupada one time in his room in Hawaii. And one devotee, I won't mention the name just because of, make someone sound bad, but one of Prabhupada's first disciples, earliest disciple, very significant disciple, drifted away and kind of went early, young hippie, went back to his hippiedom ways in Hawaii, and had long hair, short jeans, kind of like shorts, t-shirt. He suddenly, when Prabhupada was there, he suddenly turned up again. And he just kind of walked into Prabhupada's room. There wasn't any formality in it. He kind of walked in as if he had every right. He was obviously a little bit covered. And he came and he just stood there and said, Haribol, Haribol. Totally familiar, as if, we're equals or something. And Prabhupada looked up and Prabhupada said, what did I do that caused you to go away and again become like this? And what can I do to bring you back? He asked him. He said nothing. He just looked at Prabhupada with a totally blank face. No expression. A bit of a kind of negative expression. And just walked out. And Prabhupada said to Shruti Kirti, this boy has become such a rascal, but I love him. This is hard for us to understand. But this is the need for the pure devotee. Why? Because everyone is part and parcel of Krishna. How can you not love part and parcel of the Lord? We're still seeing ourselves separate from the Lord, therefore we may not feel it. For those who see everything connected to Krishna, especially those who have assisted the mission of Krishna consciousness, it is never forgotten, even if again we become a rascal. It is never forgotten. There is no loss. Neha Bhikamana Shusti, Patyavaya Navijite. There is no loss on this path. Everyone who somehow or another, even a little bit, even negatively, it has unending benefits. You may go through some material, you could say, reactions for one's misbehavior, but ultimately that connection is never lost. And this is the mood of compassion for pure devotees of the Lord. They see it in a longer term. We tend to see things quickly. Oh, why not so much now? Why not so many devotees are joining? Of course, we make all efforts to bring people quickly to Krishna's lotus feet or to devotional service. But that's much more to it than that. Much more. We can't see what's going on under the surface. Krishna sees everything. Pure devotees see everything. Although Srila Prabhupada wanted his disciples to be as eager to distribute Krishna consciousness literature as he was, none of them knew how to do it. Distributing a magazine and asking for a small donation was one thing, but a big hardbound book? Oh, I remember the first time I went on book distribution or magazine distribution in 1971. I was not living in the temple. I was visiting as much as I could. And I was still kind of like dressed like, I suppose people would say, like a hippie. And I would go out with the Sankirtan party and distribute magazines. I didn't join the Kirtan party so much. I was mostly trying to. And I remember the first time I went out trying to distribute magazines, I didn't know, nobody knew what to do. We would stand there like newspaper salesmen on the corner. Back to Godhead, back to Godhead, back to Godhead. And, who's going to stop for that, But miraculously enough, 3 people did that day, an afternoon. It wasn't a whole day, it was just that afternoon. And 3 people stopped, and they all gave 10 pence for the magazine. That's how much we used to ask in those 10p for the magazine. And I distributed three magazines. And that was, I felt really chuffed because I didn't, I actually was the most anyone did that day. It wasn't like very many magazines were going out. And but then when the big books, and when I joined the temple, big books had arrived, early 72. They had a shipment of these Krishna books arrived. But they had one before, a small one, but they'd gone. But after that, no one knew what to do. So we had no big books. But then big books came, another shipment. I didn't know what to do. We go out and try to sell them door to door. So I think 4 of us went out one Sunday morning. Actually, the day after they shaved me up on the Saturday evening. Sunday morning, we went out on door to door book distribution. That was like my first service in the temple itself, was to try to sell Krishna books door to door. And we went to this place called Earl's Court in London. And the first door I knocked on, I couldn't believe it. The first door, this guy came out. Weird looking fellow. I don't know. I don't want to speculate what he was, but he was weird. He was hardly dressed and he looked really strange. I don't know what's going on. And he looked at me and I said, "The Krishna book, would you like a Krishna book?" I didn't know what to say. He took the book in his hands, looked through it and said, "How much?" I said, "Well, I don't know. Can't remember what I said, but he gave me a £5, £5, and took the book. I thought, my God, this is easy. This is so easy. Just knock on the door and say, "Would you like a Krishna book?" And that's it. They take a book. I give you a good note, a very good donation those days. But that was the only one I did all week. The rest of the week, knocking on doors, nothing. Practically no books went out by anyone. They didn't know what to do. It was about, I don't know, in 72, maybe in April or something. We got one devotee came over who somehow or another had been in America, so he learned how to do books. And somehow we couldn't believe it. He went out on the street and distributed 10 Krishna books on the street. It was unbelievable on the street to sell these big books. And from then on, things changed. And we realized, it was possible. It's a matter of, a lot of it is a matter of just connection, confidence, and letting go of our false ego, thinking I am the doer. Just letting it happen. Instead of thinking I'm doing it, this, that, the other. Just be the instrument. Let Krishna, he's distributing his books. He's spreading his mercy everywhere. He's becoming the instrument. Having helped publish the book, Brahmana knew how painstaking. We read that. Distributing a magazine, yes. When the entire shipment of teachings of Lord Chaitanya had arrived in New York in April of 67, the devotees had hired a truck, picked up the books at the dock, unloaded them in 2nd Avenue. They had then shipped them to ISKCON centers in LA, San Francisco, Boston, Montreal, elsewhere, and there they remained. Some devotees had tried placing ads in magazines and leaving books in bookstores on consignment, but the books did not sell. You could say it wasn't a very physically attractive looking book in one sense. It was rather simple, plain cover and so on. How to sell these big hardbound books remained a mystery until something significant happened, an accidental discovery. And let's read what happened. One day in 1971, while driving to the temple after chanting in downtown San Francisco, 2 brahmacharis stopped at a local service station for gas. And if you're not from America, gas doesn't mean literally gas. It means fuel, petrol, essence, whatever it is, for the car. When the attendant came to the window for money, in those days it was, as you probably know, it was all person to person. There were no modern technology where you fill your own petrol. Not like that. No, the person would come, the petrol pump owner would come and fill up your tank for you, then come to your window and ask for the money. When the attendant came to the window for money, one of the devotees showed him a Krishna book. A bit of a brainwave here. The attendant seemed interested, and the 2 devotees began preaching the glories of Krishna consciousness. When they suggested he take the book as payment for the gas, he agreed. Excuse me. Not so easy to do that today, for various reasons. In this case, he agreed. Astonished at what had happened and inspired by their success, the 2 brahmacharis went the next day with several Krishna books and stood in front of a grocery store. And again it happened. This time they sold 2 books. Keshava, the San Francisco temple president, phoned his GBC supervisor and brother, Karandar, in Los Angeles to tell him what had happened. It's like a miracle, Keshava exclaimed. Karandar encouraged him to experiment further, and soon the San Francisco temple had 6 men going from door to door, showing the books to people in their homes. When Buddhimanta began selling as many as 5 books in a day, the devotees in other temples, especially in Los Angeles, San Diego, and Denver, wanted to follow his example. Wow. And whoever tried it and sold a book became caught up in a euphoric excitement. Is like a fever, you're caught up in this book distribution fever. And it's not a matter of how I'm doing it, it's a teamwork, it's together. So many books are going out, you feel wonderful. It's just a collectively probably united experience. When we try together, as Shekar said, just try to hit the footpath, just don't worry about the results. Just try to be there as a part of this yajna. This The experience and testimonies of devotees selling Srila Prabhupada's books describe a special taste, distinct from the happiness young men might ordinarily experience by stumbling upon a sales technique and finding themselves on the verge of making a lot of money. You could use any example, sexual experiences, whatever it is, highs that people experience, but there's nothing compared to this. Yesterday, one of our book distributors here in Paris, Dana Typo, was distributing big Bhagavad Gitas, and one man came up to him who was a kind of like a drug dealer or something, and said, if you've got some type of drug thing, I don't know, and he said, I'm looking for this, I'm looking for this, I want this. And Dhanite said, I've got something much, much higher than that, which will give you much more, ecstasy than that stuff. And he said, what's that, man? And he said, this book, take this book. And he preached to him about the glories of the book and about the effects of the philosophy. And the man became convinced. The guy became convinced. And he bought the book of Danitai. He came looking for something. Broken pieces of glass, as Dhruvaman said, I approached you looking for broken pieces of glass. And now I've got the most valuable jewel. These books are touch stones, the most valuable jewels. And this man doesn't know what the heck it is, but he received the book somehow or another. Nectar. Where are we? Yes. The difference is that the devotees' book distribution, being devotional service to Krishna, produces an ecstasy that is transcendental, an ecstasy far beyond even the greatest material happiness. Ordinary business and the business of selling Krishna conscious literature are as different as material life from spiritual life. Many people, of course, they think you're just another salesman, but it's not. Just doing these books is totally spiritual. We may not be in spiritual consciousness, but we're just doing something which is totally spiritual. Yes, and anyone observing spiritual life from the material point of view will not understand it. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had compared such empirical attempts to understand the ecstasy of Krishna consciousness with attempts to taste honey by licking the outside of the bottle. You have to enter in, isn't it? You want to taste the honey, you've got to open the bottle. But even people may not understand it. But somehow, if they take the bottle in due course of time, it will be opened. Or somebody will take it and open it and taste the honey. The young men and women just beginning to distribute books in America knew that Srila Prabhupada, by giving them Krishna consciousness, had saved them from hellish life. And they wanted to help him give Krishna consciousness to others. And such preaching, by distributing his books, was ecstasy, spiritual ecstasy. This is one of the aspects of Krishna consciousness. Normally, when we talk of sacrifice, yajna, tapasya, and so on, we're something which is not materially very wanted or not very pleasurable materially. Most people are not undergoing that sort of process. But this process, the Sankirtan movement, is simply joyful. Joyfully performed. It's the most joyful. And the more we absorb ourselves in the mood of Sankirtan, then the taste there may be some temporary taste from other forms of objective sense gratification, but it's insignificant compared to the real taste of connecting with Krishna, of feeling the presence of Krishna. By mid-1971, the temples were selling hundreds of Krishna books a week. This is in America. Kurandar, Prabhupada's book fund manager, began sending Sankirtan newsletters to the North American temples and to Srila Prabhupada by listing the monthly results of each temple's book distribution. The newsletters incited competition. Kurandar's December 1971 newsletter summed up the mood of the year and urged the devotees to increase. This is the part of the letter. Recently, an all-out program to sell books, the San Francisco Temple has been averaging 20 Krishna books per day distribution. What is their technique? Keshava Prabhu says, simply we take it our priority activity. All you have to do is want to do it and then try as hard as you can. Some of you may have been with us with Vaisheshika a couple of weeks ago, or anytime, pretty much. Every week there are seminar presentations by Vaisheshika Prabhu with others on aspects of book distribution. So one was a few weeks ago, is one of the little things he put in there was, please tick the box. Between the talks, he gave a little kind of test to everyone. Tick the box. Under what circumstances can you not distribute Prabhupada's books? And he gave a list of circumstances. When you don't have any books, when the books are at the printing press, when the books are in the shipment on the way, when you have no desire to distribute books, like that, he gave a list. He said, and most of us ticked all four. He said, that's wrong. It's wrong. Only one of them. When you have no desire, only then can you not distribute books. And he gave an example. Why? Because a few days earlier, regarding the Bhadra Purnim program, in some places, including France, we don't have any Bhagavatam sets, but we sold 200 sets of Bhagavatams even without having them to various persons, mostly congregation members, etc. And I just have to wait till the books come. But they're, in one sense, they're already sold. So you can still do book distribution even if you don't have any books. But if you don't want to do it, you won't do it. So that's the most important thing, is the desire. Krishna consciousness is primarily, everything is based on desire. If we don't have the desire, it won't happen. Krishna doesn't force, we're not machines. Free will means we have our, maybe you could say it's tiny, but we have our desire. So the letter goes on. Yes, if you want to do it, and then try as hard as you can. Everywhere we go, we carry BTGs and Krishna books. So in the principles of book distribution, there are four main kind of pillars. We have 4 pillars of religiosity. So 4 pillars of book distribution. The first one is our spiritual practices, good sadhana. The second one is get books. Third one is show books. If you don't have any books, in one sense you can distribute, in another sense you can't. You won't even be inclined probably. But if you have books, the next thing is to show the books. So it's like when we go out to the shop, or we go to wherever we go, the doctors, anywhere, whatever we're doing, work, whatever it is. When we go out, why not carry a book or 2 in your bag? There's nothing, I mean, one of the most painful things is when somebody comes and says, if you got any, what are you guys doing? If you got any information, and you've got no books or no address or no leaflet or nothing on you. You give some vague idea that we have a temple in some city on the other side of the country or something. We do have a website, but I can't remember what it is. It's like so embarrassing. Not embarrassing, it's actually, not to say, it's a great shame, almost like a disgrace. So when Prabhupada was on a plane one time, and Prabhupada was talking to somebody, and his disciples, he said, look up that verse from the Bhagavad Gita now. Devotee didn't have a Bhagavad Gita. I said, what is this? You don't have a Bhagavad Gita with you? Every true Christian, where will they go without their Bible? Or maybe Islam followers, Muhammad have a Quran, I don't know. But especially the Christians, they always carry their Bible with them. The Prabhupada said, just like that, you should always carry a Bhagavad Gita. Always be prepared. You may give them, I'm sure many of you, many times have given your own copy away on an airplane or somewhere or another to an interested person. You get another one. What's the problem? This is what they're meant for us, but they're also meant for others too. Okay, where are we? As hard as you can. He says, on street Sankirtan, door to door, to the laundromat, to the store, everywhere we carry the books. We have been taxing our brains in so many fancy and complicated ways to try to increase sales. But as it has been experienced, nothing is more successful than simply taking the books personally in hand and going door to door with this causeless mercy. Just consider how many hours a day do we spend specifically trying to distribute Srila Prabhupada's literature which is the dearmost thing to him. And this is way back in 1971. So what to speak of after that? And, book distribution really grew like anything. And Prabhupada was talking more and more about the glories of book distribution. The crowning touch to the end of the year's Sankirtan, however, came not from the newsletter, but from Prabhupada himself, who wrote to Keshava. And he said, the king of Krishna book distribution, King Keshava. King Keshava of the Krishna book, 3Ks. I have been receiving, Prabhupada said, so many reports about how my disciples from San Francisco Temple cannot be surpassed by anyone in distributing my books. Sometimes they are selling as many as 70 Krishna books daily. So if this is true, then certainly when I return to the US, I must come and stay in your temple. And when Prabhupada came in 1977 to London on his last trip to the Western world, because he had another mission as well at that time, which I'll mention now because we heard it directly from Prabhupada in the car. I was driving Prabhupada from the airport. Prabhupada so much wanted to set the seeds to establish Varnashram communities around the world. And cow protection was at the center of the Varnashram project. So he was talking, pretty much that was the main talking during his visit. He didn't give any classes, health wasn't allowing. But in his darshans, mostly it was around that. However, at that time, knowing the importance of book distribution, if you read the 7 principles of ISKCON, Prabhupada says the 7th one is to publish, distribute widely these transcendental literatures to fulfill the above mentioned 6 purposes of ISKCON. So it's through book distribution that we fulfill these other purposes. And Prabhupada, every day, Tamal Krishna Maharaj was taking up the book scores from the devotees who were going out daily on books. When Prabhupada was there in August 77, early September 77, we were on a marathon since April, since Prabhupada's health declined severely. We had a non-stop marathon till the end of the year of book distribution. So every day Prabhupada was here in the book scores. When Prabhupada was there personally in London, we made the effort to double their normal scores. Go out earlier, come back later. More devotees going out. It wasn't like, I want to hang around. I want to cook for Prabhupada. Prabhupada said, anyone could cook for me. What he told Pragosh, not the GBC, the book distributor from America. One time Pragosh wanted to stay back and cook for Prabhupada. He was a book distributor in Chicago. And Prabhupada said, what are you doing? He said, I cook for you, Prabhupada. Prabhupada said, anyone could cook for me, but not anyone could preach. You should be out on Sankirtan. So sometimes now, when a guru comes, it's like a blooming, I don't know what you call it, like 10 devotees cooking 200 preparations. It's insane, absolutely insane. Prabhupada would just take the same prasadam, no matter where he went, same cook, same prasadam, more or less, every day. And his pleasure was to see all the other was fulfilling his desire, not fulfilling our desire to serve the spiritual master, but his desire. So I like that, devotees, so he said, be on book distribution. So when Prabhupada was there in 77 in London, although he was talking, basically speaking on the other half of this preaching Krishna consciousness, this establishing the community, realistic community with Krishna in the center, Daivi Varnashram, which still to this very day, we've hardly risen above the surface, maybe in 1 or 2 places. We're still groveling out there in Spaceland. But whatever it is, hopefully it will come in time. Prabhupada wanted it, so it must be done. Krishna wants it, it must be done. But Prabhupada was receiving anyway the scores every day, and somebody said that maybe this is too much for Srila Prabhupada, botheration hearing these scores. His health is so bad, he's got to use every inch of his energy, every drop of his energy for what he has to do. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj asked Prabhupada, he said, no, these book scores are my life and soul. When I hear these scores, I feel like a young man live forever. I feel like I'll live forever. gave Prabhupada great inspiration when he heard how his books, or Krishna books, were being distributed. So by then we were distributing, I can't remember, but we were distributing thousands of big books daily between us. I don't remember. I was a Sanktan coordinator, but can't remember the scores. But it was thousands a day. We had like 70 devotees going out every day, full-time book distribution from the manor. And so it's a buried place, we didn't have souls. And everyone was so fired up. Prabhupada continued. Yeah, so that's one of the reasons Prabhupada came to London. He said, I came because all over Europe and America, devotees were on this marathon distributing books. He said, I've come to reciprocate the love of you for me. All my followers, disciples, you're being expressed. That love is expressed by distributing Prabhupada's books. By distributing books, my books profusely, you are giving me great encouragement to translate, and you are all helping me to fulfill the order which Guru Maharaj gave me. So I am very much grateful to you, and I am sure Krishna will bless you 1,000,000 times over for doing this work. I hope that you and all my beloved disciples in San Francisco Temple are in strong health and jolly mood. Interesting, strong health and jolly mood. I'll read a little bit more, then we'll have to finish. Copies of the letter went out to every ISKCON center. Prabhupada had always given his blessings to all the devotees, but never before could anyone recall his saying a devotee would get Krishna's blessings 1,000,000 times over. Although a letter from Prabhupada usually instructed a specific devotee, the instruction often had universal application, and Srila Prabhupada's letters made clear his disciples' top priority, book distribution. Prabhupada wrote, I am very pleased to hear that you are increasing in your distribution of our books and magazines. This is a good sign that your preaching work is also strong. The more you increase your strength in preaching, the more you will go on selling books. I want especially that my books be distributed widely. Prabhupada's ambition was to replace mundane literature with transcendental. At least in every home, there should be one piece of Krishna conscious literature, he reasons, because if a person read only one page, his life could be turned toward perfection. If 1% of the readers become devotees, he wrote, that will change the world. That's such a powerful effect, but it won't have, the world would change. So we still have a little way to go. I don't know the population, 8 billion. What's 1% of that? 8 billion. What is it? 80 million? Yes. 80 million devotees. So we've probably got a little way to go. I mean, it's changing. It is changing. Even though we may see, my God, what's going on right now? Pandemic, God, now another lockdown. What's happening? What's this one? This new one that has just arrived? What's it called?
Omicron.
Omicron or Omicron? I don't know how you pronounce it. Omicron, something like that. A new, new one's arrived. Another challenger. And like demons kept coming to Vrindavan, but Krishna just wiped them out. He didn't have much problem. Give him a slap in the face or whatever it is. Don't be afraid. Just take shelter of Krishna. Omicron and Nomicron. Doesn't matter who they are, whatever crones they are. They can't stand an inch with. I mean, okay, physically things go on. You may catch, you may leave your body. So many things are taking place all the time. This happens with it. If it's not Omicron, it's some other thing. Always something is there. Don't be afraid. Take shelter of Krishna. It's just another chance to take shelter of Krishna. Okay, put some barriers. Kali tries to put a few barriers up to stop the propagation of Krishna consciousness, but we will not stop. Let's see, where are we now? Yes, a person, he reasoned, because if a person reads if 1% would change the world. So it is changing. This is a part of Kali hitting back to try to, no, don't do it. Whereas mail order advertisers were satisfied with a 5% response, Srila Prabhupada wrote to have an even smaller percentage, 1%, whom he thought could become pure devotees in response to receiving a book. Lord Krishna also confirms this in Gita. Out of many thousands among men, one may endeavor for perfection, and of those who have achieved perfection, hardly one knows me in truth. To make the world Krishna conscious, therefore, would require that millions of pieces of transcendental literature be distributed. I think we've distributed about 700 million, recorded at least, pieces of literature since the beginning. That's probably more than that. That's the figure given, as far as I know. Something like that. But the figures have gone down a lot, at least in the Western world, over the last few decades. They've gone up in India like anything, but most Western countries have gone down in their quantities of distribution of books for various reasons. And there are many reasons for that. Srila Prabhupada wanted his disciples to understand why they should distribute his books, and he instructed them through his letters. Prabhupada said, who God is can be summed up in only 5 words. Krishna is the supreme controller. If you become convinced of this and preach it enthusiastically, success is assured, and you will be doing the greatest service for all living entities. And a few more letters here, I'll just read. This is to Jayatitha. These books and magazines are our most important propagation weapons to defeat the ignorance of Maya's army. And the more we produce such literature and sell them profusely all over the world, the more we shall deliver the world from the suicide course. To Jagadish, he wrote, I am encouraged to see your report of books sold, because it proves that you consider it your responsibility to see that more and more people are reading our literature. Actually, this is a solid basis for our preaching work. No other movement has got such profuse authority for preaching. And if someone reads our Krishna conscious philosophy, he becomes convinced. Prabhupada continued to insist that all major Krishna conscious programs be maintained, including deity worship, chanting Hare Krishna in public, and holding outside lectures. All programs were important, but book distribution, whenever possible, should accompany the other programs. To a sannyasi, whose main program was public lecturing, Prabhupada wrote, distribute books as many as possible. If anyone hears some philosophy from us, that will help him. But if he purchases one book, that may turn his life. So selling books is the best preaching activity. Sell books, hold the kirtan in public places, like schools and colleges, preach. And in a letter to Bhagavan Das in France, he stressed the same thing. What will your 3 minutes preaching do? But if they buy one book, it may turn their life. So there are some little preliminary statements by Srila Prabhupada on the importance, the glories, the effects of book distribution. In regards to that sannyasi or that preacher, did you say sannyasi? Yeah, sannyasi. It most likely was Rivatananda Maharaj in those days, who was preaching in colleges in England. And Rivatananda Maharaj then was not emphasizing much the book distribution, but Prabhupada then made it clear to him that any program he did, they must have books available there. Sometimes we go on public programs, house programs and so on, and there are no books. It's so embarrassing. You know, I remember I was on one program in India one time. Hundreds of people there, I couldn't speak. And the people were just coming up to me and giving me money. And the first thing I said is, bring the books. We want to give everyone a book. I said, we don't have any books. My God, we don't have any books. And people are giving donations. Yeah, that's the problem. Sometimes we forget the most important thing of all. Wherever we go on Harinam, books or some literature must be there somehow or another. We do a catering program, books must be there. Without no books are distributed. Prabhupada made it quite clear. And he said to Rivatananda Maharaj, he said, the success of your program is how many books are distributed at the program. It's not a matter of how many people come, but how many books are distributed. Prabhupada made that clear. That means people are taking it seriously and are taking away the message. Otherwise, maybe others will become, of course, Prabhupada did say they would be benefited. But, when they actually take a book away, it means they're really they're getting the full opportunity of that preaching program. They're taking Krishna away with them, permanent. Not just a memory which will be shrouded over by some other memory of some other meeting or some other activity or whatever. So I'm going to finish there, and I'd like to thank you all for patiently sitting with us for the last hour and a half or whatever it is. And if there are any questions or chit chats, a little time, we do have to get ready now. Today we have to deliver books to various groups. We may have to move our apartment today. We may have to go to the temple today, and a few other things. Maybe chant 16 rounds if we get time. Hare Krishna, or we will, whether we have time or not, that takes priority. Okay, so is there any question? There is some mention here. Oh, Matos Prabhu, Matos, dear devotee in London. Vaisheshika Prabhu gave us advice that we should make teams and cooperate together in book distribution. On the other hand, Srila Prabhu is encouraging competition. Who can distribute more, please? How can I understand this? Both. There's competition now between temples, between world countries. We're competing with Maya, competing with our minds. You can look in so many ways. Both, I think both can go hand in hand. It does in different stages, in different places, different, we're thinking a lot about this, of course, because I'm kind of in connection with all these things. Now we're thinking a lot of how to develop, and in the case of Vaisheshika Prabhu, he's developed in America very nicely this team spirit. And there's a bit of a combination at this stage between the two. Just try to do your best. Don't worry. Just try to do your very best to be a part of this great mission and encourage others to respect others, no matter what they do. It's team spirit. Those who are washing the pots, those who are cleaning the floor, those who are doing the daily worship, those who are providing the prasadam for the devotees, those who are bringing the books, those who are driving, those who are printing, those who are publishing, those who are writing. Every single devotee is a part of book distribution in various ways. So when we see it on a broad platform, even if there is within the circle of those who are actually distributing books, some healthy competition may be there, excitement there. Especially when you're young, this excitement is kind of a little impetus. But it should be done in a very team spirit. We're happy to see others distributing more books. We're happy to see more books distributed. We're so grateful to those devotees just cooking or cleaning or whatever it is, other services, to work together as a team to see that more books are distributed. Whoever distributes them, that's whatever it is. But the main thing is, whatever helps us to distribute more books as a movement to the public in a way which is nice, not in a way simply for the sake of it, but in a way which is also a good impression. We want to distribute books and people go away feeling angry or, something like that. But with a good impression, we want to see that. So although there may be a little bit of exciting competition within, ultimately we're working as a team. We're working as a team. And in many cases, at least in America, that team spirit is a little bit easier. You could say in France, for instance, here, where we're just basically trying to start a little bit of a book distribution mood. Again, they were in the 70s and 80s, of course, were practically the world leaders in book distribution. But for many decades, it's only been very on and off, sporadic, and nothing solid. So we're trying to start a little something there, small as it may be, and with mostly, different devotees at different situations that they're in. Some are in a competitive mood, some are not. Some are just doing it for the love of it. Some don't, just doing it. And some have a little competitive spirit. Maybe I'm a little bit of a competitive spirit man, having been brought up in that mood in my early years in devotional service or movement. But in general, the ultimate thing is a collective endeavor, a collective objective to please Prabhupada. Everyone has the same goal, to try to see Prabhupada pleased, to try to see these books distributed. And we're happy when we see others do more. We're happy if we can help others to distribute Prabhupada's books, even if it means I don't. It's a matter of how we can see more books going. So if a little bit of personal competition is created there, it should always be favorable, not that there's animosity, envy, greed, lust, all these things. If we see those cropping up, then that's not good. But if it's favorable and we're happy that someone else did more than, I'm not the doer, but sometimes we think a little like that. Someone else is the instrument to distribute so much mercy, makes us happy. And if my doing more, it's the same in the spiritual world. If only I could serve the Lord more, then that would, and it goes on and on and on and on. If only I could do that, devotee is pleasing Krishna so much. If only I could do more. There's a spiritual competition there also, wanting to do more. Why? To please Krishna, not to please myself. But we don't jump over people. It's not like, let me get them out of the way, then I'll be on top. Not that type of spirit. Oh, they cheated, whatever it is. Not that type of spirit. It's a spirit of wanting to, encourage and bring more pleasure to Krishna. That helps not. But ultimately, we're all working. The team means Krishna the center. It's not otherwise. What is that team? Material was full of so-called teams, but what are they doing? Nothing of any value. The team is with Krishna in the center, and within that there's variety. Unity and diversity, you could say. This is the main principle of Srila Prabhupada's mission. Unity in diversity. So, like that. Anyway, thank you for that. A question. This is from Lakshmi Priya. Question from Bhagavad Gita book distribution yesterday. Is the Bible mentioned in? Is mentioned in your book? How do you effectively answer? Is the Bible mentioned in your book? I don't know how to answer that. The teachings of the Bible are. It depends. You say, well, what do you mean by the Bible? You'd ask that. What do you mean by the Bible? So I guess I just say, well, I asked, well, what exactly do you mean by the Bible? And how much you want to get into the history of Christianity or any other religion come to that is another thing. The Bible is not spoken by Jesus Christ, as you know. In fact, only some quotes are there from Jesus Christ. Otherwise, it wasn't compiled by Jesus. It wasn't spoken by Jesus. 90% of the Bible is in a different era, or 80% of it, whatever. The Old Testament, it's a completely different era. And historically speaking, you don't want to get with Christians. We don't want to disturb in any way. So I would just probably say, well, what do you mean by the Bible? And then depending on what they say, we take it from there. But if it means the teachings of God, yes. They may not accept. It depends on how say mature they are in their own spiritual practice. Those who are immature will never be able to see anything in anything but their little book. Never. No problem. Children are like that. We're also like that when we're children. It's when we become more mature, we can see the word of God in different circumstances, different places, manifesting in different ways to different degrees according to the time and circumstance. But in the immature stage, no one will be able to grasp that. They won't be able to grasp it. You usually have to use indirect forms of preaching if you, in most cases. It's rare to find someone mature enough to accept it. It's like human society in general. They can't even accept that there's life on other planets, only on this planet. It can't exist on other planets. How can it? Look at it. We are the most intelligent creatures that ever existed in the history of the universe. It's not possible. How can you talk to such proud, puffed up fools? It's like, what can you do? They think that that's the end. Beginning, middle, and end is me or us in this tiny little 1/1000th of a second span in eternity on this insignificant speck of dust in this dust called a universe. That's it. We're the most. We are the best. We are the elite. We are the specials. Until a few thousand years ago, nothing of any value existed. And unless you come with us, nothing is of any value either. And such, what can you say? Like talk about frog in the well. It's just the way it is. So usually you have to use indirect ways. But if they're a little mature, a little reasonable, they may be able to see that perhaps the same purpose, the same truth. What's the purpose of the Bible? The purpose of the Bible is surely that we progress towards love of God. So maybe in other lines, that's also there. Maybe there's a chance at least. No. They go, no. It's the work of the devil. What to do? They're like a childlike mentality. We don't get angry, don't get upset, don't expect much. Sometimes you get a breakthrough from Krishna's mercy. I remember watching Vaisheshika one time on video, YouTube or whatever. And he was showing one little Indian boy, taking him around in San Jose, I guess, door to door, distributing books. They came to this one house, this lady came out. The little boy was speaking, Vaisheshika told, I was training them up a little bit, to distribute books. And he said, I know what he said years ago, but something like, we have these books about Krishna. Please take a look at something like that. And they said, no, 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 I'm a Christian. We're not interested in these things. He was polite because he was a little kid, obviously. He said, we're not interested in these things. I'm a Christian. The boy looked completely kind of, didn't know what to do next, absolutely bewildered. My Sheshika said, Ma'am, it is my most fortunate today. I'm so fortunate today to meet a genuine Christian like you. I'm so fortunate. Thank you so much. She started blushing like anything. She didn't know what to do. She took the book, looked at it, and eventually purchased the book. Not necessarily. It's the spirit. His mood wasn't just a trickery of words. It was a genuine expression of appreciation. And, the consciousness is not so much what we say, but our consciousness. And if we're coming up with all Christian in negativity or something, no. If it's positivity, okay, they may not take, they may not appreciate, but at least we should be, Krishna. If you so desire, please, may I reciprocate with this person in a way which will be pleasing to you and may be beneficial to them. In a mood of spirit, not that I'm better than them, just please give them a chance. But we may not remember that. But anyway, what to do? Most people are not quite ready. Next one. I think that is the next one. How to deal with bad feelings when we try our best. It's also from Natos. But don't distribute so many books. We know that Srila Prabhupada was happy. Are we still online?
Yes.
When we distributed many books. Yeah. Well, Prabhupada, Bhaktisiddhanta was happy when a devotee distributed one magazine. He would practically embrace them. You saved one soul. And Prabhupada was so happy that even if he didn't do a book, if the person simply saw the books, he was stood there showing the books. He's so happy. Many ways. We take association of devotees. We all go through ups and downs. Sometimes, pretty much every devotee is a little bit, what's the word, before going out on Sankirtan, not nervous, a little bit apprehensive, a little bit trepidation, so a little bit, what will they say? So that feeling may always be, it's part of the surrender, it's part of the excitement. So when they go through different difficulties, that's the best time in many cases, that's the best time. Then we take shelter. Then we realize I'm not the doer. Then we take shelter of Krishna. When bad feelings come along, it's a part of purification. It's like when Prabhupada gives the example when you're cleaning a room or when you're making ghee or something. All sorts of things come out of the butter, dirty things. So when you're performing Sankirtan Yajna, certainly bad feelings will come up. Try not to identify with them. Don't think, this is a result. It's a result. It is a result. It's a result of the purification. So they'll come. They're already there. They're just not manifested. When you take to devotional service, all kinds of aparabhas come to the surface quickly. And then if we can take shelter of Krishna in whatever form at that time, then it's possible that these aparabhas, these tendencies, these bijas and kutas can be disseminated or at least be reduced if we take shelter of Krishna. This is the process. This is the whole process. This material energy is hard to overcome, but when we take shelter of Krishna, we can cross beyond it. So bad feelings are reminders that we're conditioned. They're reminders we need to take shelter. They're reminders we're not yet liberated state. But if we take shelter of Krishna, we're protected. So when it's necessary, sometimes these things happen to help us to go forward in our spiritual life. Don't worry about the results so much. Just try to be an instrument. Just try to take shelter of the Lord in this form of service, whatever form he gives us, whatever service he gives us. Try to take shelter and tolerate, as we know in Bhagavad Gita, Matuspashas to Kuntiya. Try to remember these type of verses. This doesn't just refer to external difficult situations. Like yesterday, we were on Sankirtan in Paris, Harinama book distribution in the center of Paris. And it was mild, temperature wasn't too bad in the beginning, it was raining, but it wasn't cold. And About halfway through the day, the weather changed, the wind started coming in, the weather went really cold, and the wind started getting in. At the end, the wind was so strong, we had to hold the book table down from blowing the book table away. What to speak of the books? It was like a gale force wind was blowing. The harmonium was placed on a stone thing there, started to get blown away by the wind. We had to hold that also. It was, sometimes external situations are not so favorable, but we carry on. We see there's Krishna's mercy to help us to bring. And internally, the internal ones are much more difficult, which you're mentioning here, bad feelings. And the result of not just doing so many books, you feel like, what am I doing out here? I'm useless. This is useless. Whatever. All kinds of things come in and you start, I don't like this. Maybe you start, when you say bad feelings, that could be any, I'm not even going to get into it. All kinds of nasty things may come up. But please help me. Take shelter, Krishna. You know my weakness. Take shelter. Take shelter of the holy name. Take shelter of scripture. Take shelter of Vaishnavas. Take shelter of Krishna. We cannot on ourselves, on our own, overcome these challenges. It is not possible. It's only by the mercy of Krishna. So if it should help us to try to remember that, to try to do our best, take shelter of Krishna. We are in a covered, fallen condition. We know that. So we try to take shelter of Krishna at every moment. So when we forget that sometimes, especially on book distribution, you think, I'm doing really well today. Almost every book distributor has experienced it. All of a sudden, you're not doing very well today. And for 1, 2, 3 hours, no books at all are distributed. And you get, you may feel a little down in the dumps. You just go and read Prabhupada's books for a while. I was traveling for some time with Tripurari Swami, who wasn't a sannyasi then. It was before he took sannyas. Prabhupada said he was the incarnation of book distribution. And I was with him in Manchester one time in England. We were going out on Sankirtan, book distribution. And I went back to the van. He was sat in the van reading Prabhupada's books. I said, what's happening? He said, not a good day today. I'm just reading. And he went out again later on and did books. But sometimes we need recharging. Maybe you go back to you have to discuss it with your devotees and so on there, wherever you are in London or wherever it is. But, whatever it takes to help us to become focused again. Don't be overwhelmed by the distractions. This world is full of distractions. Our mind is part of this world, which it is also is very susceptible to distraction, easily distracted. When things don't go externally the way we like, we can easily get distracted. So we need help. Krishna, the devotees, Shastra, like that. Don't become negative or depressed. So you can even go to some of these bad thoughts coming in my mind. Never mind, let's read Krishna book together for a few minutes. Oftentimes it changes the whole consciousness. Take shelter of that which will purify us, not just, you don't have to battle with these things. Take shelter of Krishna. He'll do the work, he'll cleanse, he'll purify. It's not a battle against. Sometimes we hear declare war against Maya, but that's not like in our brains. No, they're going crazy, fighting with all these thoughts. Just try to hear about Krishna. Try to take shelter of Krishna. Okay, that's it. I think it's it. Okay, thank you very much, devotees. Well, if you are able, in some way or another, to help with this great mission of Sankirtan next few weeks, please do so. If you want to help us here in France, please pray that we can become free of the false ego and try to become an actual Sankirtan instrument for Lord Chaitanya's mission. And whatever you want, we're trying to distribute books within the first, how many days we've been out now, Gauranga? 4? Day 5, isn't it? Today's 5 today. Gauranga Prema Prabhu was with me, the others are elsewhere. Day 5, 4 days. And how many books have we distributed so far, Gauranga? I think we've distributed about 800 Gitas so far. Not me, believe me, but between the devotees, about 800 Gitas have been distributed so far. 4 sets of books and lots of small books, and medium books and things like that. Good. We had not many devotees going out yet. Usually we try to build up over the month. Moment is just a regular full-time devotees and a few devotees joining them here and there. But we hope that will increase their pace as the month goes on. And we hope you do too. Keep smiling and be happy. We'll have a kirtan to finish off our morning session. And Hare Krishna. Jai Prabhupada. So stay with us if you want for a few minutes of kirtan. Believe me, there's always a way to distribute a magazine, a book, whatever it is. There's always, Krishna has his plans. Whether you do 1 or 1,000. There was one devotee in France, his name was Ram Vijay, in 1980 something or another. He distributed 1,000 Bhagavad Gitas in one day. Something. Gitas or other books. 1,000 in a day. In the parking lots, he would go on the parking lots in the shopping malls, you know? It was incredible. 1,000 books. And in Switzerland also they used to do like that, like 1,000 books in a day. Big books, not small ones. We've you know, even dream of being able to do that, but nothing is impossible. Nothing. You'd be surprised. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Gauranga, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Prabhupada, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Bolo! Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Gauranga, Hare Krishna, Nityananda, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, oh Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Transcendental Book Distribution ki jai. Go Premanandi Hari Hari Bol. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. We'd like to offer our blessings to Shama Kumari, who went out on Sanktam for the first day the other day and collected $60 New Zealand dollars for two Bhagavad Gitas. Fantastic. Well, I wish we could do that here in France. That's like a mammoth donation. And she's going out again tomorrow. All blessings to Shama Kumari. Thank you so much for that service. All glories to all of you, wherever you are in Philippines. I see wonderful devotees in the Philippines, in Malaysia, in Australia, in New Zealand, in Fiji, in India, and of course all over Europe, and so many places there. Well, anyway, wherever you are, thank you very much for being with us this morning. And we wish you all the best in your services. If you can, please take part in this great yajna all over the world going on now. The greatest yajna of all time is now taking place to distribute Srila Prabhupada's books. Millions and millions of Bhagavad Gitas hopefully will go out during this December month. Hare Krishna. And I was talking to devotees last week in Punjabi Bag, one temple in Delhi. There are a dozen temples in Delhi, and that temple alone, their quota is 300,000 Bhagavad Gitas this month. So you can imagine what the totals are in India for how many books or Gitas will go out this month. We're not expecting in Christchurch or in Manila, you'll distribute 3 million Bhagavad Gitas, or even in London, not to speak of France, but we can do our little bit and a lot. Vaisheshik, one of his main emphasis is a little by a lot. If 10,000 devotees go out and distribute 2 books each, that's 20,000 books in one day. If one devotee goes out and distributes, well, even if they do 20,000 books, it's still the same. And if that one devotee stops distributing, it becomes none. But if 10,000 devotees go out and one stops distributing, it doesn't make much difference. It makes a difference to that devotee, maybe. But it doesn't make much difference otherwise. There's still, 19,998 books are going to be distributed. So everyone can play their part, and we have a big result. Many hands make light work. You have a big result. If we have 1,000 devotees doing one book, that's 1,000 Bhagavad Gitas together. And then we can try to encourage each of us to do more. Maybe some will do more than a one. And then that will inspire the others to do more than one too. And it goes up and up and up, just like we heard from San Francisco. 1, 2, 3, 4 a day. Wow. And now 4 a day, well, I think, what am I doing? But you're doing great service. It's relative. Competition is only there to help bring us to the absolute and not stay, I can only do 1 book a day. This is limiting. It's not a fact. We can't do anything, but we can be instrument to no end of books being distributed. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Those who are going out, Matos is going out again tomorrow. Thank you, Matos. And everyone else who's going or not going, we pray that your spiritual lives will blossom. Hare Krishna. Thank you so much, everybody. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hari Bo, Hari Bo, Hari Bo, Hari Bo, Hari Bo. Jai Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Rasika, I think we'll have to wait. I'll do that maybe later today. My time is very short today. Hare Krishna. We were going to do another interview, but we'll wait now.
Thank you
Hare
so
Bo.
much.
Thank you all very much, everyone. Hare Krishna. Glory to
Thank you, Guru Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Jai
Hare
Krishna.
Keep safe.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Bo. Jai Prabhupada. Jai.
Hare Krishna.
Transcendental Book Distribution Ki Jai.